going to be working on the bazaar a lot. So this was just like one way I could incorporate the technology.
Anthony Amato? Here. Valerie Anderson? Alan Brown? Gregory Cava? Rebecca Devine? Here. Michelle Laura? Here. Emily Hibbard? James Hirschfield?
Here.
Jennifer Cody? Michael Sinatra?
Here.
Peter Tagley?
Here.
Sydney Waddle? Here.
That's 7 present.
And Greg's walking in, that's 8.
All right, so we have a quorum then. Valerie, Alan, Emily, Jennifer are absent. At this moment anyway. All right, the next item is opportunity for the public to comment on agenda items. Is there anyone who wants to address the board? Not seeing anyone, we'll move to item 3, consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of 2 meetings, the special meeting November 13 and the Education Committee meeting November 16. Is there anyone who wants to remove anything from the consent agenda? Seeing no one, then the consent agenda is approved. Item 4, report of the chair. Nothing really to report. I'm just glad that things are moving forward in controlled fashion under good supervision. All right, item 5, superintendent's report. Dr. Castellino.
Yes, hi everyone, good evening. We also are very happy that things are moving along. It's hard to believe that we're in December. I've been to the schools the last 2 weeks and the kids are really working very hard, seeing a lot of rigor, engaged lessons. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing going on in the classrooms. Last week, I believe it was last week, we had Frank LaBanca here who did a workshop with the administrators and with the science staff at Chapad. And that was the first of many opportunities to work with him. Our science teachers are also going to go to his school, which is inquiry-based. And again, that's the West Side Academy in Danbury. And so we're really pleased with that work. So a lot of good things are going on. And, we're moving along. Do have some appointments. Christy Hardy, Secretary at Chapad. That's for Julie Dolan, who you'll see retired. And then we have Rowan Leffer, the new security at front desk, and Jeff Martorelli, a custodian, part-time at WPS. Remember, that was in addition to the budget last year. We put a part-time custodian. We have 1 leave of absence, Karen Wapatek. She will be back, and she is sorely missed. Resignation, Drew Barksdale, paraprofessional who got a full-time job, so we're happy about that. I do want to let you know that 3 of us went to the CAVE convention in Mystic the weekend before Thanksgiving. Michelle and then Sydney, a newcomer, which was fabulous. I know that we learned a lot. It really is very informative. The speakers were wonderful this year. There's always a morning on Friday, evening on Friday, lunch on Friday, and then 2 on Saturday. So there's 5 speakers, and one was better than the next. So we really, I thought it was wonderful. I know that Michelle at a future meeting would like to come and do a little overview, correct? Yeah, so we're really, yeah, so it's just really, if you can go, it's always beneficial, and even for the day, you don't have to spend the night. Sydney, who has jumped right in, is going to a new board member workshop this week on Wednesday, great, and so we're very excited about that, and I did send an email. The National School Board Association is having their national conference in Boston in April. I know it's a tough week. It's around the holidays, and it's the musical at Chapad. But if anybody's interested, please let Debbie know. I did send an email. You can go to the NSBA website. It is a little costly, but I think it's worth it if you really want to go. Right now, I said I would go, and Sydney's a yes, Michelle is a maybe, and Jen is a yes.
Is the region paying for the board's members?
Yes, the region pays for the board's members. but it is really well worth it. I think you get a good overview of what your roles and responsibilities are. I think you make some good connections, not only around the state, but around the nation. And it kind of reinforces what you're doing and the work you're doing and how important it is. And we budget for that every year. So we will make it happen if other people want to go. So with that said, I think that is my
All right, any questions for the superintendent?
presentation.
All right, then I'll move on to committee reports. Ag Science Steering Committee, Mr. Amato, anything to report?
Nothing to report.
Can I ask a
All right.
question?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, as we're in this sort of in-between planning phase, I keep having people in the community come up to me saying that they want to help, they want to be involved, they have various skills, and what do I do with that information other than?
At this,
Well,
go
an
ahead.
an official building committee setup has not been set up yet. It has not been done. I'm going to be getting to it shortly. And so nobody can make decisions without that mechanism being set up. So once that's set up, then if people want to be referred to them to see if there's something that they can really do, the committee can look
This
at it.
isn't really building, this is more like curriculum or like the advisory type
Right.
people.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I would have people either email me or call Debbie, and we'll start a list and trying to get what their expertise is. Kim also probably has a list already.
I have a list. People are emailing me, so have them email me. I've been keeping all of that, and they're certainly welcome to join the advisory committee. That's where a lot of the curriculum will be reviewed, as well as plans and so forth.
So, the advisory committee, because I know the advisory committee has met for Region 12. Is that going to continue? Because, Bill Davenport was consulting with us to help try to get this thing going, but he just, so are you going to
That's a
continue?
part of our statutory requirements
That's ongoing.
as an ag program. Deliberately, we have not had come up with bylaws, elected officers, any of that, because there literally was no project to advise at this point.
Right.
So the advisory committee, we've had 2 meetings, and they were mostly about how can we help to get the vote out.
Right.
But that was a very casual meeting. Once everything really gets moving like it is now, that's when it gets very serious, and we start looking at curricular plans, looking at sketches, looking at everything.
Okay, and so that's going to happen before we hire a director for the...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh,
I
that-
wasn't sure, I didn't know which came first, because...
Yep. I would foresee at least 2, if not 3 meetings in this school year.
Okay.
Okay? So,
Yeah.
and just have them email me. I'll take care of it.
Great. Awesome. I just didn't know if we were waiting for a director for that, before that stuff happened.
No, we can't afford to wait that long.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks.
Thank you, Kim. All right. All set with that then? Ag Science Steering, Education, Michelle, anything?
No, I actually forgot to ask, I think, do you know what's on our next agenda?
Our next agenda is the preschool,
Okay.
yes.
That's December 14th.
So
Yes.
our next,
I was going to actually say something about that at the end of the meeting, so we'll get to that later.
about our next meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
like canceling it. December 14th? Okay, all right. I don't have to. Only if Jordan wants to.
All right, well, we'll see.
Okay. I'm sorry, Education Connection. Don't have anybody who goes.
No,
Facilities?
they actually canceled the last meeting.
Can I just say something about that?
They can't, okay.
I'm
Yes.
still listed on there,
Yeah.
with them.
I just want to let you know that, I think I've said this before, the superintendent, the executive director, Danny Thibodeau, is retiring from Education Connection, so they are looking for a new educational leader, superintendent. So there have been surveys out there and different things, so just so that you're aware. We do a lot of work with them, they're our RESC, so I just want to let you know.
Is that considered a big job?
It is considered a big job. I asked about that. It's a desirable job. A lot of financial pieces to that job, a lot of business aspects. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Facilities, Greg, anything to report?
Yeah, actually, two things. One of them is going to be on the agenda is item 8.4. The other is the building committee. We've discussed some preliminary discussions on the potential makeup of the committee. We received a set of guidelines. It's funny, everyone is operating under the assumption that the best thing you need to do is to find people that have some experience in the building, what have you. And the set of guidelines that came in from the state said that's exactly the wrong way to approach it. You should get people with judgment, forget any expertise or knowledge. So we're we're taking a look at that, and we'll make a recommendation to the chairman and to the board. I think we're going to turn our attention to that in our next meeting. We've been focusing so far on the architect, and now we're going to move on to the issue of the building committee. So the facilities committee, which is the interim building committee, can go out of business as the building committee. We're looking forward to that. So we should have a recommendation for you for the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Rick? Finance, Valerie's not here. Bob, anything to report?
No, we had the meeting tonight. The current budget is at 4.8%, so we're doing okay there.
Bob,
Preliminarily,
I'm sorry, Bob. For those of us who don't know, what does that mean?
Well,
It's at 4.8%.
we have 4.8% of the budget remaining at this point for the year. We were at 5.2% last month. So as the year progresses, we'll get down back to that 1% number again. Just the timing of the remaining 7 months. We went over the preliminary fund balance to return to the towns. It's made up of $23,000 of unexpended appropriation, $114,000 in additional revenue that we received. So we'll be returning $138,000 to the towns when the audit's completed. Most of the revenue came in from the sale of that stock that we've been kicking around here forever from that Sun Life conversion, and I finally got rid of that. This past year was about $70,000, and $20,000 more was from the unliquidated open purchase orders from the year before, and we had $25,000 in additional revenue from tuition students that weren't budgeted for. We had more revenue come in, so we'll have $138,000 being returned to the towns by the time we're all set and done with the audit. The audit's in. We've closed all the ledgers. We've finished the reporting to the state of Connecticut. Now we're just on to the actual audit report itself. So we should have that done by the end of the year.
Thank you, Bob. And Michelle?
One other thing we talked about was the 1% capital fund, and the balance in there right now is $553,000 that is unencumbered.
Yeah, unappropriated.
Right. Unappropriated, or yeah, not earmarked. And we sort of talked about a threshold that we felt we would always like to keep in there of about 1% on your contribution, which is around $200,000, which means there's $350,000, give or take some, that we feel that the facilities committee should consider as they're looking at priorities on this building and the capital the capital repairs list that was done, because there's not a lot of point in keeping that balance growing,
To spend it. To spend it, to get the repairs done.
yeah,
Get
so
some of the
it
items
would be
off
our
that list.
recommendation to just take a look at your priorities and know that it's there.
We will. I think the facilities committee has been a little bit hesitant on venturing into new expenditures until we get through the mall project. I'd like to see that because that's likely to cause us to want to extend that project into other areas of the school and to improve the lighting and whatnot. Those of you who have been out in the mall have seen that the lighting is a vast improvement. And once you see the colors and the non-carpet, the resilient flooring that we put in there with that darker color, you will see that light will then be absolutely perfect for the room. So, but I think what we're trying to do is to think that through. So but we will almost certainly be coming back with items from there. Plus, don't forget, we've had a lot of not emergencies, but urgent spending needs on facilities over the last few years, and that's where that fund has been tapped for that. The pool was one prime example of that.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mike.
Since we're on the subject of money,
We are.
the $1 million gift that we received, generous gift from the Diebold family, what's the process for determining how that gift would be used?
Well, I have not had a conversation personally with the Diebold's. They've been away, and I'd like to meet them. Valerie tried to set up a lunch with Noni Diebold. I don't know Noni when she was on the Board of Ed. I was a new member back then. So, if you read the pledge, though, it said that it had to be fully approved and fully completed before their obligation came into effect. So, it's a waiting period right now. They're not obligated at this moment until things are finalized.
And I assume they would have input, though, on what we're thinking about or even planning.
Well, I don't know what their intentions are as to how the money is to be spent, or is it just a general grant and we do with it as we wish, or they have certain ideas. So I have not spoken to them, but I intend to.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Long-range planning, Alan is not here. Negotiations, Mr. Fowler.
We have no ongoing negotiations.
Okay. Policies and bylaws, Michelle.
We continue to meet monthly. We have several policies on our agenda today. I just wanted to mention that I went to the policy workshop at the CAPE convention, which I do every year, and it's always phenomenal, and there's always way more information than we can pack into our small amount of time. But the one piece of information I found interesting is there were 19 legislative acts passed this last year that affected 30 school board policies. So, yeah, in 1 year. So 30 policies that need to be adjusted or put in place in order to be compliant with just the new laws without the catch-up that we're continually working on. So it's,
Amazing.
yeah, it was unheard of every
They're
year.
busy little people up there.
Yeah. So Vincent Mastraro is he's the guru of a cave, and he said he's never seen anything like it, and he can barely keep up with it, and it's a full-time job.
He's ready for retirement, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do without him. I've been meaning to write a letter to Cave. We're so fortunate to have him pouring through these laws and really trying to help us decipher what it means for us, because lots of it gets buried in something that it has nothing to do with school law, and it's our responsibility to tease it out and then make it functional for a school system. So it's remarkable the work that he does for us. I don't know what he's paid, but I'm sure it's not enough. And I keep telling him he needs to bring somebody on board with him, because I think he's been wanting to retire for a while and feels like he can't. So, yeah, it's a lot of work that he's
Well, we're indebted to you for keeping up on it for us. So.
I'm trying. I don't know. I was keeping up, but I'm trying.
All right. Well, then we can move on to old business. Second reading policy 5114, suspension and expulsion due process.
Yes.
Go
So
ahead.
this policy we reviewed last time, and I just wanted to say I did ask about this policy in the workshop. And by the way, I wanted to just mention, I don't see her here, but Teresa has really done a great job. The feeling I got was that we were ahead of a lot of the other boards, because we're already working on the stuff that came out this year. She takes the briefings that Kate sends us and jumps those policies in front of the regular work. So anyway, so we talked about this policy, and the issue that Valerie had with the mandatory expulsion of a kindergartner or a pre-K through 3 student
Pre-K.
with a firearm.
Pre-K.
Yep. So it is state law that the expulsion is recommended. It is not required that recommendation be taken by the board or the hearing committee. So
it's not mandatory, all the way through.
well, it's mandatory that be recommended,
Oh.
but but it is not mandatory that that be accepted. I don't write it.
Okay.
So that's what Vince said the law says, and I meant to actually go back and like pull that, and I forgot to do it. But I did ask specifically about that question twice actually, because the first answer it didn't seem to make sense to me. So hopefully that will make them feel better. But everything else in the policy is as we talked about last time.
All right.
If there are
Any
any
questions, or is there a motion?
Yeah.
Great.
I'll move that we accept this for second reading.
Second.
All right, Michael. Is there any further discussion?
I think I'm sorry.
All right, this is to approve policy 5114, suspension and expulsion due process policy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 8, new business 8.1, first reading policy 5118.3, non-resident attendance. Michelle.
Yes, so if you look at this policy, this is what, I think it was just last year that we put this in place, and the only new language is in number 5, it's highlighted in yellow, just moving the date to the first tuition payment being actually due before school starts. That was a request of the business office, I believe. It's
Also,
just,
we need to ensure that the resident, it's much more difficult to get people out than it is to allow them in.
right.
And so you want to chase dollars for a reason to get them out.
So, that's the only change.
All right, Greg.
I move we accept proposed policy 5118.3 for first reading. And in support of that, would say that's a very sensible amendment.
I second.
All right, Jen. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approval of 5118.3, non-resident attendance policy for first reading say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, it passes. Thank you. Item 8.2, first reading policy 5131.6, alcohol use, drugs, and tobacco, including performance-enhancing substances. Michelle.
Yes, so if you look back at the history, we just revised this last year, March of 2014, and we're in pretty good shape because back then we just threw in the word e-cigarettes because we knew that was coming. CAVE expanded on that language to call the electronic nicotine delivery systems and vapor products. So it encompasses more than just e-cigarettes because the whole field has become very creative, and I think that's good language to really capture what's on the market now and what might be coming soon. So that is, you'll see that sprinkled throughout the policy. The other major part change, if you scroll all the way down to page G, medical marijuana. This is this law was just passed as well. We are required to allow students who are 18 years of age or older who have a certificate authorizing them for the use of marijuana, that they be allowed to attend school. But there are, of course, a lot of stipulations on how exactly that works. Just so everyone's aware, we have very few students in the building who are 18 years of age or older, and I think, this is not the kind of policy that's going to come into play very often. And there's nothing we can do about it if we feel otherwise. This is the law, but it might sound sort of scary, but I think in reality it's not going to be. And the use of, this is also, I just want to point out, we're in the 5,000s, so this, which means that this policy pertains to students. There is a different, I believe we actually even did this already for staff. Okay, so it's different. It is a different. It's in a different place. So this is only for students in this policy.
All right. Greg.
Now, I have a question on the medical marijuana portion of it. It would seem that this is a situation in not be able to refuse to enroll them because they're using medical marijuana off premises. Because it appears to carve out any use on a school premises,
Right,
on a school
right.
bus, or anything like that.
Right.
Do we have a policy that if a student uses drugs off of school premises and we find out about it, that we take disciplinary action against them?
Are you talking about prescribed medication?
Any
I was gonna say,
medication,
Jim-
any drug. I mean, I don't care anything.
Can we ask him?
The only way that we would move, and I have not done it here in the time that I've been here, but the only way that we would move to discipline a student is if it disrupted the educational process here. And so it would be something like student is selling drugs, there's some, fights or violence involved, it comes back into school and they're all mad at each other, that's when we would deal with it. It would have to cause a significant disruption here. It's not by any means an automatic, nor has it been since I arrived.
And I'm not aware of such policy. That doesn't exist somewhere, but.
Yeah, I guess it just seems troublesome to me that we would have a policy that implies that we have the authority to regulate conduct of people off premises.
We already have that by educational
This is
law.
pursuant to
We don't,
federal law.
we don't need a policy for that. We have that responsibility by educational law.
No, I understand that, but this doesn't say what you just said. What you just said is if it impacts.
Right.
You only get involved in it if it impacts. But I think that what this policy suggests is that we would have the ability to expel a student because they've used drugs, whether they be legal or illegal drugs, off premises, even though it hasn't disrupted. And that's what's troublesome to me. I think this is not as carefully crafted as it could be in order to get at what's a legitimate concern and a legitimate interest. And it does trouble me. Also, it would, I'll leave it at that.
Well, Greg, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that by including this, it makes it sound as if by protecting the rights of the student who's been prescribed medical marijuana and is using that outside of the program, it implies then that other drugs somehow, the use of them off campus is not protected? Is that?
Well, no, I think what I'm saying is that the way this reads is it said we're not going to refuse to enroll a student or penalize them for having, if they're a medical marijuana certificate holder, except under certain circumstances, certain narrowly prescribed circumstances. The trouble with when you write a policy like this, if we were to have a student who used illegal drugs, let's just make it illegal to make it the hardest case. They use illegal drugs off premises. It has no impact on the school. It has no impact on discipline. It has no impact on the behavior of other students. It has no impact on this student's performance in school. But we find out about it and decide to expel them. And I would not want to find out that the authority for it is the implication that they don't have a marijuana certificate. It's not medical marijuana, and therefore we have a right to do that. I mean, personally, I'm trying to figure out what business of it is ours, what students do when they're off campus, as long as it doesn't impact their performance here or other students in the school.
Well, I would.
Greg, the principal just said that to you. They don't do it unless it affects the school here. And so, and there is no policy that I'm aware of that addresses the same situation you just brought up, that people are suspended because of this use off off the ground.
I would look
It
at
doesn't
it.
affect the student's performance at all. The answer is no, it doesn't happen. Not suspended.
This is as the negative image of that situation, because there's a reason why this is being called out as an exclusion. And the exclusion is, well, so in the case that Greg described, the principal, let's say, could exercise judgment and expel the student. In this particular case, if they're using medical marijuana, that option is now off the table. And I think that's
and what are the implications of it. So as long as we're clear that this is not a situation in which we are going to be invited to start disciplining students for conduct off campus that has no impact on the school system. That's all. As long as we're clear on that, what the principal is saying.
So you were saying that the enactment of this policy would actually increase burdens on the system? They would be forced to do things that we weren't otherwise required to do?
Not burdens on the system, opportunities to do
Yeah,
things.
you say it implies that we do the converse of it. To me, it's just sort of, it's like a protected class situation where they're just letting us know, hey, don't even think about this, but the rest is under your judgment. And we always have that right as a board, unless we pass a law like this saying we don't. So it's just a tack on to this policy.
Is there anything else? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to adopt first reading.
5131.6.
I'll second.
All right, so moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? There's comments now. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. E3, first reading policy 5144.1, use of physical force.
All right. This is a brand new policy, so that's why you won't find any yellow highlights, because the whole policy is new. It is a policy that, there have been a lot of cases in the news that of abuse of physical restraint. So the state enacted a law outlining that. I don't have much more to say. I mean, we went through that. We struggled with this. We read through this whole policy in committee, and it sounds sort of alarming. A lot of the language and a lot of the pharmacological, there are lots of a lot of these don't even pertain to our school. We don't have students on these kinds of medications. So I'm glad Allie O'Hara is here tonight to answer any questions you might have if you read through this and felt alarmed by the language. Because it is sort of alarming, and it makes you sort of wonder, well, what are we doing for physical restraint? It talks about seclusion and leaving students alone, and whether you can or not, and the conditions. So I just encourage you to read through it. And if you have questions, I'm going to defer those to our professionals. And the only other thing I would say is that it's law, and I believe most of the language in here has to be the way it is. I don't.
Okay.
Do you want to add to that?
Sure.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Sure, go ahead. Have you or your staff that you know of ever felt ill prepared to handle any situation even to the present?
No, well, I think no, because we've trained people. We have used protective holds or restraints.
So you haven't been held back by the system in any way that you felt that you were hampered?
No, I think this is new legislation only in the idea that we're required to now have, by 2019, everyone on staff trained. And a lot of this is things that we've been doing for years. We are lucky in Region 12 that we don't have a great need to have to protectively hold anyone. But a protective hold is really when you're only going to use it when a student is in danger of hurting themselves or others. And we do have, there are students with needs that might be self-injurious. So if a student starts to hit their head on the wall, you need to stop them from doing that. So there are teachers on staff currently that are trained in each building. Right now, we have a very small team of teachers trained because it really isn't something we deal with regularly. But because the law is changing, 16 new teachers are going for training in the next 2.5 months. And there are still 7 teachers that I'm working with that have been identified through their principals and paraprofessionals as well to get them on the registered for training. It's just dates aren't working for them. We use a company called PMT Associates. It's physical management and psychological management and training, and I would say the first half of the day is truly de-escalation techniques and best practices for to not have a situation like that happen. And then the last part of the day is learning how to do holds, escorts, and such. So we do have teams trained here, and that's been the case for a couple of years. We generally are reporting 0 to the state every year. We do that already. We make annual reports to the state. We have had reports in the past, since I've been here, of some restraints. It outlines some additional changes to PPTs, that if there's a number of restraints or seclusions, you have to have a PPT meeting, which is a planning and placement team meeting. So it's not a scary, it might be scary to you guys because it's hard to hear that might happen. You should know it doesn't happen here regularly, but a lot of this law, the only newness for us, we have dealt with the paperwork associated with it. We have contacted families in timely manners within 24 hours, as it states. So a lot of this isn't new. It's just getting a whole staff trained by 2019, and it's training that needs to recertify every year. So we have a teacher right now who has an interest. And has a great positive attitude and would be a great trainer. And so my plan with him is to train him as a district trainer so that he can begin that work with us so we don't have to continue to send staff to Middletown to get trained every year. But I think we feel very prepared for this. This isn't anything we're not dealing with. It just sort of outlines now that it's not just a small select team, and it's going to be far-reaching to everyone in staff.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One, this policy actually seems like it places more restrictions on us than it opens up issues. And I just want to be sure that you feel that this is a policy that you can work within it for the needs of addressing these circumstances. There's nothing in here that's going to hinder your ability to make the school a safe environment for the student that's involved in the situation and others.
Right. No, not at all. I think, Michelle, you're right. When I saw the pharmacological agents, that was new to us as well. It's not something we're used to dealing with. But no, I don't think what's in place, I think they've just outlined it more clearly. It's been best practice with restraint and seclusion since the very beginning, and I've been reporting on it since I've been a special ed administrator, which has been 9 years. So there was maybe a year or two where they didn't have to report anymore, but it's been back for a couple of years. So it's not a great deal of newness for us as a team here in school.
All right. The other second question, I have one more after that. The second question, I guess, is that I assume we've also trained our resource officer and these people, because you've got a restriction on life-threatening physical restraints. And this is, I'm certain that our resource officer must be trained in these, but
that would be, I'm not sure
well,
about. I'm assuming so.
I think we should, only because this precise situation has led in certain police forces in the news to the death of suspects.
And it's certainly part of our training as well with the PMT that it's those kind of restraints are explained to us, and that's something that you're taught.
Right. So we would want to make sure that we have dovetailed with our resource officer and anyone else, any other police officer who might be in our school to make sure, because they're going to be our employees and they're going to be subject to the policy.
Well, Kim shook her head yes. I can double check with Barb. Right now I've really been working with teams of people, teaching staff, paraprofessional staff that may have the potential to need to do that. So people that are on crisis teams in each building.
Yeah, and then the last question I had is that have we ever had or contemplated the need to administer these psychopharmacologic agents?
No.
You said we haven't done that before.
No.
We've never administered them.
No.
Do you anticipate a circumstance in which we might have to administer them?
Are you authorized to administer?
So sometimes doctors write a PRN prescription for, like if something is happening and there's something major going on. But no, we wouldn't do it. A nurse would do that work. But that's not happened. I'm not aware of any orders like that we have. But yes, where I've been before, nurses do have an order where if a student is getting agitated, there is a certain medicine that they give.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at these, and it's a fairly broad definition, and it would seem to me to include a host of antipsychotic drugs as well seems fairly broad. I just wondered if there was anything that you think you need to think through before you're ready to make those kind of administrations, should the need arise.
I think our nurses they would keep me in the loop if there was an order out there like that, and I'm sure, we would work through it, but I feel comfortable that.
I mean, since you can't administer it without their consent, and since a person under 18, there's a question of whether they can consent under certain circumstances, I would imagine this is something you're going to have planned in advance.
Right, we would have doctors' orders, and generally students that are like that have very specific behavioral plans that would call for steps to be taken prior to, so.
That seems a prudent policy.
Isn't it typical, though, that a student who, let's say, was on an antipsychotic medication would be outplaced? They wouldn't be here?
Not necessarily.
So there are some situations, we just haven't encountered it here.
Right, not
but
necessarily.
There could be a situation
Absolutely.
where someone.
Absolutely,
Okay.
but not necessarily.
All right.
But yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That was all very helpful, actually,
Sure.
to give us that kind of a framework. The thing that just sort of jumped out at me, and I think that we probably just have the luxury of not really having to worry about this in the same fashion, the 24-hour notice kind of jumped out at me, because we're in the age of instant information, and if something happened and a child was put in a hold and another child is filming it on their phone and puts it up, and mom finds out about it that way before they get a call from the school. So I kind of wanted your opinion or your thoughts on the 24-hour notice in response to that issue of instant information.
Sure. I mean, I think when we have had to use it, we call immediately after when the student is safe and we can proceed. So sometimes, though, you can't get in touch, and so it feels a little awkward leaving that on a message machine. So you might not be able to explain everything exactly, but just saying, please call me or please touch base. But that's why they give you that time frame. Yeah. And there's paperwork that needs to be filled out with each incident that we have already and teachers have been trained in, and the paperwork also goes home within 48 hours, and then I report. There's a special website through the state where I have access to report, and I have to do it in a timely fashion with the state as well.
Okay, thank you.
This isn't specific to this policy, but it just makes me think for you and actually for all the administrators, I get worried. This is another training that all teachers have to do, and between administering meds and all of the hazards and the
Child abuse.
the suicide prevention, the teen date, but the state is adding so many trainings that are mandatory of so many teachers. I guess I would ask that you all keep us informed as to how that's affecting time and workflow, and whether someday we're going to have to negotiate like another teacher work day, because there's also educational professional development. I think it would be a shame that if all of our PD time got eaten up with
The mandates,
mandated
sure.
protocol
Mhm.
stuff, and we didn't actually get to talk about.
Sure, because the initial training is a full day, 9 to 4, and then the refreshers are half days, so they're 3 hours.
So a half day every year for every
Teacher.
teacher.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a lot.
when I was in Watertown, we did train a staff member to help us, and what we did was when we were doing it in house, and when we had somebody that we could access at different times and sort of be flexible. We were working after school hours and paying people for their time then, but we were doing small groups because you can't do the whole staff at once. You're talking about very specific training that needs to be the trainer needs to look at what you're doing and make sure you understand. So it does end up being pretty time consuming, but we've been able, when I was in Watertown, we were able to get it to maybe 2.5 hours. And we did train, we had 60 plus people trained there at the time, just a bigger system, a bigger need.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that the state has asked for the complete training of every staff member. What I found in Watertown was when you train people in it, they think you want them to use it. So, you taught me how to do it, well, I just worry about that thought, that everybody's getting trained because it's really important and you need to do it. So it's just really important to understand that the only time you ever touch somebody is if they're going to hurt themselves or others.
Right.
It's not a compliance issue. It's not to get them to go from place to place. And I think when you start to have every single person trained, it just sort of diminishes the gravity of this is a very serious incident. I don't know that everybody would ever be called in to help in a situation like this. You wouldn't have 60 people running at this situation. You would have it to more like 2 or 3.
Right, right. Well, I
so-
can only imagine that the reason the state wanted everyone is so that it could be on the spot, whether
Yes.
somebody was there. But I just think it would be interesting to tally up the number of hours required each year, especially after, once the initial training is done on all of these mandatory trainings.
There's a task force working on it, it's called unfunded mandates. And this is on that list as well.
Yeah?
All of these mandates suddenly eat into a huge amount of money that's been unfunded by the state but passed into law. But that's in that coalition that I'm on. So we're working on that now.
It is. It's a huge amount of time and money.
There's many more unfunded mandates that even eat into us being required to do things that might not take away from the education of the students, but turns into significant dollars.
Well, and it's time, whether it's...
A lot of time.
Yeah, all the task forces and committees, that each building must have, and we're so small. We have to have, safe school climate committees and all these task forces, and we only have, we have a few buildings with very little staff, and so they must be on every last committee there is. So it just concerns me, and I want to make sure, I worry that, the professional development for education will get eaten up, so,
And Pat, maybe this is something that you could address with Gabe. I mean, if you're seeing a negative impact, or you're getting feedback from staff, that it's a waste of time, or not useful, or hurts the
Well,
education
it's not
process.
CAVE so much, it's the state and the legislatures who put them into law. But as Bob said, I heard
CAVE is a
yesterday
part-
at a meeting
right.
CAVE is
that
a
they're
part of the
looking into
coalition.
it.
Right.
Right,
Coalition's made up of CAPS, CAVE, CASBO members, and CAS members.
right.
Sure.
And these issues are being brought forward just for that reason. What we're trying to do is to get a chance to look at this legislation before they decide to pass it, to see what the impact is, so we can guide them. This is what happens when they go off on a tangent, and then we have to backfill their desire.
Well, there is a possibility for reform.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything else around? You're all set.
well, great.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we adopt proposed policy 5144.1 for first reading.
Second.
All right, we move in second. Is there anything
And
else?
I just want to add one thing.
Yes.
Anyone who is laboring under the feeling that our teachers don't have a lot on their plates when it comes to being able to teach the classes that they teach and to understand the pedagogy of how to teach it and how to convey those lessons, that they also have to constantly be up to snuff on a variety of these kinds of policies. It's really an amazing thing. Just wanted to say that we appreciate your staff's efforts, Pat, very much. in
Thank
trying
you.
to
I'll
stay on
pass
top
that
of these
along.
things.
Thank you.
I was just going to add to that at the CAVE conference, there was a, what was that? We went to their last workshop on the task forces that CAVE has, working with the legislators, and I need them to,
Oh, great.
I haven't told my husband yet.
Not so great.
Not so good. But it concerns me, that all these mandates coming down, and so I'm hoping we can see some reform or a little more common sense on the front end. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
It's been moved and seconded. 5144.1, use of physical forces. First reading, is there anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Item passes unanimously. All right, item 8.4, consider and if appropriate, approve a contract in an amount not to exceed $1,650,000 with Castle Blues as architect for the Hyperscience STEM Academy project, as recommended by the Facilities Committee. Greg,
Yes, the Facilities Committee met on the 30th, I believe, of November, and we interviewed two architects, the two architects that responded to our request for proposal. Castle Booze, whom you're very familiar with, and also Silver Petroselli, which is another architectural firm that does schools. These are both architectural firms that have a lot of experience in construction and renovation of school facilities. And Lord knows if you've had a chance to look through this book, you can see that they've outlined in detail just about every project they've ever worked on in these areas. It was the consensus of the committee, of the facilities committee, unanimous consensus that we would recommend to the board that we engage Castle Booze. We felt that in particular the Castle Booze proposal was very responsive to what we were looking for, and that there were very realistic timelines in it, and it made sense. The cost for the two contracts, the proposals, were very similar. Silver Petroselli had proposed a price of $1,500,000 plus $50,000 in reimbursables, so that's $1,550,000. Castle Booze was $1,575,000 and $75,000 in reimbursables. That's $1,650,000. They're quite similar in terms of price, so it really came down to the firm that we thought that we had the highest degree of we felt better about in terms of this particular contract and our needs and whatnot. Both excellent firms, and we're recommending Castle Booze. Now, at this point, we have not attempted, we've not started negotiations with Castle Booze over the price, so we're asking for an upside price. We're not, they ultimately be this price or maybe a little lower, but not to exceed this price.
Correct. What's the nature of the contract? Is it a firm fixed price, or is it more time and material?
Firm fixed. It's really firm fixed. This is a fixed. This is the price for the architectural services.
And this carries us right through the entire project.
This is through handing the keys to us, basically. It's a turnkey set of services, and it includes both the planning and execution of the architectural plans, and it takes you also through contract administration, administering the construction contract, the contracts that we engage in with general contractors and subcontractors for the
Which they involved during the construction?
Yeah, they actually are here several times a week. They inspect all of the work, and no one gets paid until the architect has certified to the building committee that the work has been completed in accordance with the plan.
So that's part of that.
And also they certify as to where the contract is. So in other words, if somebody has completed 50% of the work and there's a 15% retainage, they have not been paid more than 43.5%, I think that would be. In other words, they haven't been paid more than the work as far as they are in the contract, less any retained, less the percentage.
They're advising us on progress payments?
I'm sorry?
So they're essentially advising us on progress payments?
Yeah, they're advising us on progress payments, and those progress payments will go along. For the larger, I mean, for some subs, there won't be progress payments. There'll be a one-shot deal.
Right.
But for the larger subcontractors, they're going to be advising us on that. And the idea is the building committee wants a high degree of confidence that nobody has gotten ahead of us in terms of payment versus work, and that the work has been done, and it complies with the contract, with the engineering standards that are required.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
What, just in general, high-level stuff, what would be considered over and above to this price? Did Charlie outline the things that would cause this price to increase?
I don't think we really discussed that there would be anything that would cause these prices to increase. I mean, obviously, if we were to, I mean, I suppose if after the contracts have been let, and the drawings have been done, the contracts have been let, we decided to change some major.
So outside of a material change.
But
like
if
the
it's
one-
something we haven't changed, I don't think that there's something that's going to cause this contract to increase.
I want to thank the superintendent for checking on Castle Booze. I think that was important,
Yes.
based on what I took out of the presentation, so I'm glad you did that. Also, risk versus not at risk. Did we get, I don't remember discussing that
Yeah, but it's not
not appropriate
not for
for
the
this-
architect, that's
Okay.
really the
Construction
That's
construction
fine.
manager.
Okay.
Anything else, Peter? Anything else?
Nope, that's,
All right, Michelle.
Just kind of two questions. One, I'm wondering, was the building committee concerned that we only had two bids, and did you feel sufficiently inspired by the drawings of Castle Boost to not feel the need to go back out to bid to look for other options?
Well, I mean, obviously, you'd always like to have as many as possible, but one of the reasons why we didn't have a lot is we set very high standards for what you had to have achieved before you would be able to bid. You had to have a large amount of experience with large projects of the size of ours or a little bigger than ours. So that would, and you had to have a level of experience in those, and that would tend to disqualify some of the smaller outfits and other firms. But we wanted someone that we would have a incredibly high degree of confidence would be able to carry this project through and had experience in projects of this nature. And so we sort of self-selected, we sort of self-limited the numbers. So we didn't expect that we would get a large number of bidders, but we felt we had a contrast, we had different approaches, and I think we were generally satisfied with what we had there. And the other thing I think is that both of these firms have worked in our high school building before. So we were dealing with people that had experience with our building. So we felt that they were familiar with it, and it worked in our region before. So I think we were pretty pleased.
Just out of curiosity, I unfortunately wasn't able to go, but they weren't presenting drawings, were they? It was just to have the process and the fees for the next phases.
Yeah, pretty much what they were presenting was some sense of what they had done. They were presenting themselves, making the case why they were good at it, and then they were giving us a general timeline for when these things were going to be completed. And one of the critical questions we asked was whether or not there was any likelihood that the science labs could be completed sooner rather than later. And Silver Petroselli seemed to think that those could be completed in time for the next fall. And Castle Booth said there was just no way that was going to happen, and it was going to take longer than the fall of 16 for those to be completed. And that was a critical issue for us because we felt that it was not likely that those science labs could be completed. That those jobs could be designed, bid out, and don't forget, you don't just start in the science labs. You've got other stuff that has to be done before that. So we kind of felt that was, as much as we would love to have them online in the fall of 16, it's just not going to happen. And it's not realistic, I think. So that was an issue.
They were the first to present, so of course my heart did a little pitter-patter, like, oh, good, it can be done at the end of the summer, and all will be ready for the world. And so it was interesting to then have Castle Blues present and then ask, would you be able to get it done? And it was interesting, the response was, it's virtually impossible. And it sort of actually shifted my thinking to say, well, he was realistic, he was honest, and he wasn't trying to
Tell you what you wanted to hear?
which I really liked what I heard.
Yeah,
But so that really for me was
The other thing is we pushed him. I mean, he was
Yes.
pushed on that to try to get him to rethink that concept of not being able to complete it, and he stuck to his guns, and that had an enormous degree of credibility because when you're giving not the answer they want to hear, but an answer you feel is realistic, and when you're pressed and you stick to it, that's credibility. And I think that impressed a lot of members of the committee.
Are you asking that board to approve the expenditure of $1,650,000 tonight?
Contract.
When is the money to be,
Well, the money isn't going to be spent
when is the money going to be due?
It's going to be due when they start, or when they deliver. I can't remember. For some reason,
The whole $1,600,000 will not be spent and given to them until this project is over. It's as they complete various
I
stages.
don't want it to be difficult. God forbid, the legislation didn't pass in the spring or whatever, and we didn't have a project, because it wasn't funded.
Well,
And
we
have
will
committed-
expend some of the money, Jim, because let's face it, you can't go to the state.
I just want to be clear on
Yeah.
that. How much would it be, until they had to stop, how much would we estimate would be spent?
Don't know. I have to look to see, it depends on how far they get into it. But for example, you can't really go to the state and ask for them to send us a check until the state doesn't pay for the construction until the work is in place.
I just want to be clear that you're
Yeah,
asking
so
for the
my-
approval of this.
My guess is a good bit of the $1.6 million will be out there before money starts coming in, based on construction work being
But you
done.
could, if you were,
Before we know if there's been approval, final approval.
you'd probably be into that no more than about 250,000 in that, if you were even that much, because what they're gonna be working on initially is schematic drawings, and that's a higher level, and that's what they need to get into, start working on getting the permitting and so forth, and the getting into the state before the real drawings are done. By the time they actually start putting the real drawings together, they have to go through a whole series of steps. And that's
There has,
when
I
the money
understand there
comes
has to be an expenditure by the region, commit to some funds to move this thing forward, and you're estimating 200,000?
Yeah, I mean, we had
I'm not
put
holding
some-
anybody to anything.
Right, and we had put some money in last year's budget to get us started on this anyway, outside of the bonding. So we probably got over $100,000 devoted in that budget just to do this before we even get further into it.
Anyone else?
So just to be absolutely clear on this point, because that was my question as well. Said differently, we expect the state to approve funding sometime, let's say latest in June, right? May, June of next year? Fair enough, right. So your estimate is by that time, we will have spent a couple $100,000 more or less?
Based on what a project of this size and that would probably entail.
Yeah, because I think that's the line, we gotta be very, between now and then, we gotta be very thoughtful of every dollar we spend, understanding, right, that it's not over until we get that
Yeah, I
final
mean,
piece of
once
paper.
you say that you want to engage that, we have to negotiate this contract, as Greg had said.
Right.
And in terms of that, clearly there's going to be in one sentence that we can halt this project with, if the state doesn't fund this thing.
Let the referendum that passed,
Right.
relied on the state passing.
Absolutely.
I think it's an important point in the contract with K&B is that there are no, there may be some termination for convenience charges, if that's the case, but if you guys obviously should try to get that to be, minimal, if not zero, considering we're actually going to get that.
Yeah, I mean,
Pay for
we'll
services
consult
rendered,
with
but
council
I don't
to
think
do
there
that.
should be any T4Cs, if in June we have to say stop, so. Greg, I had a second question. I don't have the number in front of me, but maybe you do. When we did the project plan or the budget, we had architectural A&E as part of the budget. How close does this 165 come to that line item?
I don't have the numbers with me tonight, but it was below what we had in there. I know
Below
I
the number
remember
that we
seeing-
had in the budget.
Yeah, the original budget. But the other part of it is this construction manager part. Two of those are together in that estimate. So we still have to see them,
Anything else?
get numbers on that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question because I don't have the budget in front of me. And unfortunately, it's all been pulled down from the website, so we don't have it.
Yeah, I left my book on my desk, so I can't refer to it myself. But I just wanted to test to make sure that the first commitment here, we're not already on the wrong side of our budget. So if we are at or below the line item budget, then that's a good thing. I know, but I'd like to confirm that.
I'm trying to find I have the presentation here, but unfortunately, I don't think I have enough detail in these slides as to what the exact,
I think it's the one with the blue cover.
Bob, you said those numbers were combined with the construction management.
The numbers that I have, let's see, they're all of the services.
You have it split out though?
I don't know if I have it exactly in the office, but I do know that at one point they were part of the very detailed work that they had done.
So could you tomorrow send us, see
I won't
what
be
you
in
have it
tomorrow.
split out and see what this line item
Get
compares
it
to
by the
budget?
end of the week. By the end of the week, I will definitely have it. I'm not in tomorrow.
I mean, a motion could be made that is conditioned on that this number is in fact below your budget.
I think that would be.
If someone wants to make a motion.
I would like to move that we, I don't know, I was gonna make a motion that we, approve, the recommendation of the contract for Castle Blues not to exceed $1,650,000, condition, on the condition that it does not exceed the original budgeted line item for this, for these services.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so this is the second. Is there any further discussion? You have that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn? Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. I haven't checked there. It's been, does the board have any thoughts as to whether it wants to go forward with its meeting next Monday, December 14th, and instead just wait until after the meeting? Christina, did you want to?
I just, we have, the only presentation we have is the REACH presentation. It can be done in January. I know it's a very busy time for everyone. And so I just thought, as a little holiday gift, that we, many of us met last Monday, So I think we could certainly put it off, but certainly we can be here if you need it. But the only thing on the agenda is the REACH presentation, and that can be at the first meeting in January.
That sounds good.
So moved. Sorry, second. Second by Anthony Chianzini, December 14th meeting. All those in favor? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, we'll
That's
get
good. That was something here.
We have a
Shall-
committee meeting.
Jen, you can talk her through it. We'll talk therapy.
I was just, cause I got so much to do, but it's all right.
You know what?
One
why don't we
opposed.
Don't be a Grinch.
We'll come Wednesday.
All right, now is there a motion to adjourn?
Kids have school for a whole nother week.
Oh, my God.
Very.